Welcome back to the Wellness Check. Today's conversation is going to be on eating disorders and the specifics around, can boys and men have eating disorders? And the answer is yes. Stereotypically, we think of white females in the United States that have eating disorders when we think of anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. But really, there is an entirely new amount of research that has been out for quite a while now that really disproves that that's just the only population that has eating disorders. It's actually very universal around all cultures, all nations, all countries. It doesn't really delineate as much as we thought it would, at least from the past. Can men and boys have eating disorders? Yes. So I have some statistics that I thought you might want to know about today, and also some treatment options to look at. So interestingly enough, 10 million boys and men just in the United States alone will have some form of an eating disorder throughout their lifespan. That's about a quarter of all reported cases. Of all reported cases of eating disorders. Mostly what we see with men and boys, we see a lot of bulimia and we see a lot of anorexia. But there's also another type of eating disorder that we really see in men, and it tends to often go undiagnosed and untreated. It's something that I have referred to in one of my previous videos on the lesser known eating disorders, and that is what's called big orexia, also known as reverse anorexia, also known as body dysmorphia. There's lots of names for it. Megorexia is another one. You will not find this in the DSM, the diagnostic statistic for mental disorders. You will not find it in there yet, but it will be coming. I just know it. This is a pattern of disordered eating and eating disorder where men and boys have the pressure to look a certain way in the form of getting bigger muscularly. Just as there's a lot of pressure on girls and women to look a certain way, there's also an insurmountable amount of pressure for men and boys to look a certain way. To ascribe to that, the diet culture of a man must be, or a boy must be, very strong, very fit. We're looking at the six-pack, we're looking at the biceps and the traps and bigger and better. Well, that can actually lead to a very disordered and troublesome route, if not curbed, if not really kept in a more healthy mindset. And the individuals undergoing this tend to spend way too much time in the gym, working out. They're taking maybe additional things like creatines and steroids and anabolics and things like that to increase muscle mass. And it is accompanied by body dysmorphia as well. So despite how much muscle they pack on, they're still emotionally and mentally not liking what their body looks like. And that just perpetuates the disorder in and of itself. They might live a very protein-packed diet. They might restrict calories when it comes to sugar intake or anything else. There's a lot of energy and focus and determination that goes into this that actually puts them at a risk for malnutrition, for stress fractures, for muscle fatigue. We're not letting that body recover. And then just emotionally and mentally, a lot of turmoil there, focusing on the body and how to make it bigger and stronger. So these statistics are what we have. But keep in mind that a lot of eating disorders, but especially eating disorders with men and boys, tend to go underdiagnosed. And why is that? I think part of that has to do with just the stigma of therapy. And although it has improved greatly over the past decade, maybe a little less than a decade, there still tends to be a lot of stigma around a man or a boy coming in for therapy for body-related issues. So a lot of these numbers are still underreported and therefore not treated. Another community that tends to be very affected by eating disorders and disordered eating is the LGBTQIA+ community. Lots of pressures, lots of body dysmorphia here as well. if one is transitioning or identifies as this or that. Either way, either end of the spectrum, there's a lot of body change that goes into that process for some of these individuals, a lot of pressure. Sometimes women will really restrict to the point where they're underweight and malnourished and they no longer have menses, their menstrual cycle, as a form of being able to identify in a more masculine way. There's so many different ways that this unfolds, but this is what we would consider also an at-risk population and community that we really need to look at. So it's not just something that women and girls have to walk through and treat and understand. This really is just as big of an issue with boys, with men, and it just is something that still to this day is underreported, underdiagnosed, left untreated, but very much an issue. So I encourage you, if you are one of those individuals, or if you know someone who is, what do we do? What's the next step? Well, treatment would say, let's go find you an eating disorder specialist therapist who can help work you through all of the body image issues, the tendencies, the behaviors. Work with a dietitian who specializes in the treatment of eating disorders to help you with what your food intake looks like and how to get to a healthy state with your body while also being able to attend to the emotions behind it. That's what we look at when we're talking about disturbance with food and body. And like I said, it's not just girls and women. It's anybody, it's everybody. It's not just the United States. It's all over the world. I just can't help but wonder if we actually had a true representation for what these numbers really look like, we would have a very different plot of data, and it would be staggering. It would be very different from what we have already. So it's more prevalent than you think. The spectrum of disordered eating and eating disorders is just that. It's a spectrum. You hear me say that a lot. Disordered eating or eating disorder. They're not the same thing, but there is an overlap. We start with disordered eating is, there's something a little strange going on here. There is a disturbance with food and body. There is anxiety about what the body looks like. There is manipulation through food on what we're doing to the body and what the expectations are. Then we move all the way over to eating disorders, which is where you find those clinical diagnoses of anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, etc., etc. But that spectrum is very wide, and we are finding more and more words and I guess you can say diagnoses to kind of fill in those gaps between what is an eating disorder and what is disordered eating. All of it is important. All of it is really hard to go through emotionally, not only for the person, but for the family as well. So no matter where somebody is on that spectrum, I just encourage you to reach out to try and talk to a professional about it who really understands this, who can help you appropriately and safely as well. Okay, thank you for checking in with your wellness. I'll talk to you soon.